Welcome to Illo Talk Pages Edition, and I've got my good friend Scott Lost here. We were kind of talking in a chat, and every time Scott talks about his original pages, he does it in the same way that I do, which is like what he's learned from it and what he's gained from it. Scott Lost is co-host of the Making Comics podcast with Keith Foster, and also a comic book illustrator and writer. We've got some Ryan Ottley pages up. Why don't you take me through what you brought?
Okay, so I actually have a page of Invincible 112, and this is page 16. So this was back in 2014. And back when you could get Ryan Ottley's pages at a very reasonable rate. And, we were talking before we got on the air here. I'm totally kicking myself for not getting more pages. They were so reasonable at the time. I paid $150 for this page, but owning the original art is super awesome since Invincible is pretty much my favorite superhero comic of all time.
I've got 4 pages of his. Yeah, just kicking myself because he was killer back then. He's killer now, but now he's commanding those rates that are huge, as he should, which is awesome. What is it about this page, or what have you learned from it, or what kind of jumps out at you? What drew you to this page?
The composition. It's such a simple page, but the composition of the page is very pleasing to the eye. He wasn't Ryan Ottley of now. So yeah. It's like you can walk straight up to him. There would be a couple of people at the table, at all times, but it wasn't like long lines that you're getting now. I had already been drawing my comics for about 4 years at that point. And so, just learning different techniques and ideas on how pages should be laid out and like how compositionally, this page moves your eye through it very well. And it's evenly distributed. So you have your, monster girl over here, and you have robot. And so it just creates this zigzag with your eye, just brings you here, brings you back, brings you over here, brings you back. And then even here on the last panel, Rex's eyes are directing you off page. So it's a great composition altogether. I love the balance. Surprise. I said it was $150. It was $150 for both pages. So in reality, it was $75 a page. It's so damn crispy. Like, looking at the line weight and everything, it's just a beautiful page. I love it so much.
Did Ryan ink that page as well?
I believe he did, because there is no other name on it. Yeah. So it's just Ryan's big signature there. This looks just all Ryan. Something interesting about this, there's blue line under these pencils. So he just did, it looks like he does his thumbnails or his layouts digitally, and then he prints them out, then he does pencils, and then he does inks. That is like one extra step that I didn't think that he would do, because I used to do the same process. I would, and I know Scotty Young does this as well. They'll do their stuff digitally. They'll lay everything out, get the composition down, and then they print out the blue line, and then they ink on top of it. They just go straight to inks, where Ryan did the layout, then printed that out. And it's just like, if you really look at the underdrawing, it's just the framework. And it's really loose framework as well. Like, there seems to be a corridor right here. Oh, and so it looks like he did the corridor back here. So he just statted this in. So statting, if you guys don't know, is when you reuse an image, you just copy and paste it. So he statted this little corridor right here in this background. And he says so even right here, stat panel 1 BG background. Mm-hmm. So I love that. He's one of the first artists that I saw that would reuse the same panel for comedic effect. Yeah. And I love that. Like, the idea of reusing a panel, like, oh, you just get a free panel. You don't have to redraw this. Like, to me, that's really sick. And it's like such a time saver. And the fact that he's doing it for comedic effect is great, because it gives you a pause on the line, or dramatic. You can go either way with it. It's like, okay, this particular part of the story, we need to sit here for a moment, and we need the audience to sit.
They've got that shot that they use every time we go and see Cecil's, hidden underground base or whatever. And the joke is, it's always the same exact shot. Like, they literally just copy and paste it. I've seen some of the original pages that have it on there, and it's just blank, right? Because he drew it once, and it always says parking in rear.
Yeah. The one thing that is different from time to time, not every time, is the trash can. Sometimes the trash can's knocked over. Sometimes the trash can's full. sometimes it's moved or something like that, like, or there's a dog. Yeah, it's the defense building, it's the front of the building, and there's just that small trash can, and that's the one thing that changes.
There's a couple of things that jump out to me when you start talking about leading lines. So we've got the diagonal kind of zigzag back and forth pattern, and even that black up at the top on that top panel that leads us into Monster Girl's eyes. But when you come down, the muscles of her neck and everything are leading you to Rex, right? Yeah, right in there. And then and Ryan draws very distinct face shapes, but with Rex, he like kind of exaggerates the pointiness of his chin, right? And so in tilting the head to the side, the arrow that is made from his chin is leading us back into that third panel, right? And then from there, we've got the ears and eyes that are kind of pulling us into the face, and then we go down the nose to the mouth, and then again those muscles take us right back into that fourth panel in Rex. And like you said, the energy or tilt of his face would normally lead us to our left, right? Because he's tilted that direction and he's facing that direction. But then having him look back, we always are looking where people are looking, right? If somebody is looking at something, if you're talking to somebody and their eyes dart over somewhere, you're going to look to see what they're looking at. And that leads us in. And then as well, the tilt of the head, because of the eyes, it gives us a little slope like on the back of his hair and down his shoulder that also kind of like gradually leads us over to the right. The flow of this page.
The swoop of his hair right here.
Yeah. The composition, like I think that's one thing that might get missed a lot with Ryan is he is really thoughtful about page flow. Like almost everything in the page that he does seems to be intentional to lead the viewer to the next panel, and specifically where in the next panel he wants them to look. And so, yeah, the page of this, the flow of it is great. And then
the other thing I like here, though, just to stay on the head positioning, like he's doing a lot of acting. And that's another thing I really like about this page is there's a lot of action without having physical action. Like there's a lot of physical or facial like drama going on. It's very clear Monster Girl is upset, and he's trying to reason. He's like pleading his case. Like I can tell what type of conversation they're having just based off of facial expression. So he's trying to reason with her. He says something that he believes to be true, and she's not having it in panel 3. Panel 4, he's looking down because he knows his head is tilting downward because he knows he's going to do something that he didn't want to do, but he has to do according to how he thinks. And having the head tilt down, like you had said, it would normally lead you to the left, but the eyes are pointing you to the right. Now, with that happening, what you're creating is a pause. It's making the reader stay here for a moment just because of the conflict of the head moving left and the eyes moving right. So it just keeps you on that image for a minute. And just like all of those things were deciding factors as to why I bought this page over others.
Yeah. Yeah, and one of the reasons I chose the pages that I chose as well from him, because I got some pages from The Haunt, which is a book I haven't really read. I don't really have any affinity to or anything. And he was like, "Why, are you a fan of The Haunt?" And I was like, "No, like the acting on these pages is just freaking killer." And he's like, "Oh," I said, "Yeah, I mostly buy pages so that I can like deconstruct them and learn from them." And the way that he does acting, like you were saying, is just phenomenal, because if you're looking at this, it's a bit of an echo, right? We're doing a reverse shot on this page, and the composition is basically the same. The characters are taking up about the same amount of space. They're in the same place. And so that also like further reinforces the contrast of what does change, because there's so much repetition from panel to panel that when we look and we see her eyebrows knit together and she's frowning, and then in the next shot she's exactly the same in position, but then we've got a very drastic diagonal downward change in her eyebrows that shows anger, and the mouth changes. And so as you're looking at that, you can just see that. And then it's almost like looking at a storyboard, right? Where we're looking at the second panel and the fourth panel, and you can see his head tilt down because everything is basically the same. So we pay attention to those changes, just like the trash can in that stat shot. We can see him turn and point his head down. I don't know that that would land as well if there wasn't a change, if Rex was like that the whole time, or if this was just a single shot of Rex. Like the two and the two, because of the repetition, give you motion as well in the change.
Yeah, absolutely. And something I just noticed while looking at this inked version of the page. So you brought it up earlier, Ryan inked this. This is some of the smoothest inking. I mean, like, to really look at this stuff up close and personal, it's crazy how steady his hand is. Like, this stuff looks precision. It looks like he freaking did it with a ruler or something in French curves. It's just so well done. Here's a slight thing that, you know, you can't really see on the original, is he decided to really harden these lines right here, where he has them not as thick. He has a real thick outline on Monster Girl's shoulders. Now, I feel like that one move, beyond just the face, it really tenses up the body. Like, it makes it feel more angry. You know, this is soft, this is hard. And also tensing up the neck muscles. Just the change here, there's so many more because, you know, she's angry. So of course veins will be bulging out of the neck. So it's the devil's in the details, man. It's the small stuff that really matters and that you have to pay attention to when looking at this stuff. And like, even here with the traps got thicker as well. Like the line weight on the traps, you get way more going on. So just using the neck muscles, and as you're speaking, like, how does that affect your throat, you know? And those are the details that not everybody does, and just killer stuff right there.
Yeah, from panel 1 to panel 3, Rex is sending his kind of robots that he's controlling towards her. Like, she doesn't know that that's happening. And as you increase the line weight along her shoulders, it actually draws your eye away from her face towards the edges on either side, which draws attention to the approaching robots. Because otherwise, you know, you might miss that they got bigger because they got closer. And so there's actually several things that he's doing to, like, say, hey, look over here as well. This is an important part of this panel to kind of pay attention to.
Yep, absolutely. And he keeps that line weight on them nice and small, skinny lines, because while you want to see them, you do not want them to be inhabiting the same plane necessarily. It's like, no, Monster Girl's in the extreme foreground, and it's like they're in the midground. So they're there, but her line weight needs to be way thicker. And just, my God, man, it's so crispy. Just looking at these lines, it's crazy how clean they are. Another thing that drew me to this page, and this is, how do you say it without making it sound weird? There's just particular things I like to look at.
Yeah.
Like noses and teeth. Like, those are my two favorite things to look at on drawings specifically. On people, like meeting people, I have a tendency to stare at people's noses because it is the center of the face, and so it's hard to not notice. And like, it's like, oh yeah, I like a nice nose, you know, or a different nose. And so one of the things you get here, obviously, you get different types of noses, and when you're drawing, you need to have more than one in the chamber. A lot of artists have same face syndrome. And like, my favorite artists have same face syndrome. And like, look, it's just what happens. Even Ottley, you know, his Peter Parker is pretty reminiscent of Mark Grayson. So
yeah, and a lot of the female characters in Spider-Man are like, oh, is that Adam Eve? You know?
Yeah, exactly. Right. And so that stuff happens. But he does have a lot of different nose, you know, in his repertoire. He draws a ton of different ones. I mean, you get this 3/4 view of Rex's. You get that ridge, that bump in the nose, and you have the tiny little one. And even there, he's doing a lot of acting with it, like with her getting angry. Now, see, this is interesting. This is like a dramatic movement in the nose, but you kind of don't really register it. So this is I would say this is like it's like a front on with a slightly undershot, and this one is the chin is down and angled, but the nose seems to get smaller. Like it should get longer with a downward angle. The nose actually should be longer, and
Right.
here it's a bit longer than it is here. And that's a small detail that I didn't notice. Like the good part is it doesn't affect the knowledge of who this character is. It's like I'm not confused all of a sudden that like, wait, is this still Monster Girl because her nose size changed? It's something to hammer home this particular expression. And so sometimes you have to do those things aren't natural in life where you are adjusting the face of the character, but for dramatic effect, for it to look better. Sometimes you keep that. I'm running into that like in my book right now. There's a couple of shots where I'm like, this isn't that consistent with the previous shot. She looks a little more, I don't know, anime-ish style, manga style, or, you know, her eyes are slightly bigger. It's like, how much of a problem is this? And so you really have to make that decision when you're looking over your art, you know, is that okay with you? Like to have that. And like, and the reason why you decide to keep it is it dramatically, it helps. Like there's a certain look to it that it's conveying that you want to convey, and you're actually pulling it off. Now there's some minor adjustments. It's not really that big of a deal, but you know, as long as you can live with it and you think it doesn't affect the readability of the character, those small details, they're interesting. I didn't notice it until just right now with this.
That's one thing I love about comics is without getting like really cartoony, you can still like really exaggerate facial expression in a way that doesn't actually happen in reality without it kind of breaking that fourth wall and taking it out of the story. And it just makes the impact of that emotion even more.
Mm-hmm. And last thing on this page, and we can move to yours. Again, I love teeth. Now, yeah. Ryan Ottley, pound for pound, dollar for dollar, I think he draws the best teeth in the business. I said so much to him when I bought this page because of...
What was his response to that?
He just kind of laughed a little bit.
Yeah.
And I didn't know what I was expecting from him, but he just kind of like laughed a little bit to it. But it's true. I really love this. Like, okay, Monster Girl, she's a monster. She's not going to have completely straight teeth. Like they should be a little jagged. You know, it's just like, okay, her front tooth here seems to be smaller, and that means that they're not exactly straight. And I love that. I love that detail, whereas Rex's are pretty straight, you know?
Yeah.
And yeah, just looking at different mouths. And that's one thing about looking at original art or just studying pages in general is the thing that you're interested in getting better at, you can see how your favorite artists do it. And you know, my all-time favorite artist is Jim Lee. He's like kind of my number one guy. He's the one that had probably one of the biggest influences on how I draw. And Ryan is a very strong candidate, if not the candidate, for how I draw now. Like my style is an amalgamation of kind of all my favorite artists, but at the same time, Ryan, I would say, had as heavy an influence on how I draw as Jim Lee did. You know, so and that's a pretty huge thing because the time span in which I've been consuming Ryan's work is so far is a fraction of how long I was studying Jim Lee's work. And I was like, I like how Ryan draws teeth compared to the way Jim draws them. Not that one is better than the other. They're just both different techniques. And so which technique applies more to how I want my stuff to look? It's like, I don't want to be a Ryan clone or a Jim clone. It's like, I need my own stuff in there, but I take a lot of inspiration for how Ryan does teeth. And so if you look at my pages, my most recent pages, you'll see the influence of how he does it. Now, I obviously don't do them as good as him, and I do my version of how he would do teeth. But, you know, you always would hear like, hey, don't ever draw all the lines for the teeth. It looks weird in between the gaps and stuff like that. And I was like, okay, good to know. And then because I would draw each individual tooth when I was younger, when I was a teenager, and I'm like, yeah, that does look weird. It's better to just have kind of like this mouthpiece looking thing in there. And what Ryan does really well is he sometimes he will break that rule. Like down here with Rex, every single tooth is drawn there. Every tooth is outlined there. And then down here on the lower end, you get the gum line. The gum line will show you, but then the top, he does every single aspect of it. And so it's just the variation of those types of things that are really interesting to me, and their choices. It's like, okay, where does it make sense to do it? And that's everything with art. Everything is like a decision. And why are you doing this? Like, is this drawing more attention to this? Is every line drawing more attention to the mouth? I don't want that. That's not what's important in here. And I think with this one, it kind of is, because there's a fret there and there's a worry, and it kind of like makes you go inward and like think about everything. And so it's just like, all right, I understand why he has all the lines for the teeth. And I don't know if I'm conveying that well enough, but in my head, it makes sense as to why he is doing it.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the things that I'm often looking at when I'm looking at pages as a point of analysis is like, where do they do stuff? But I think almost more importantly is, where do they not do stuff? Like, where is stuff absent intentionally? And I would agree. What's really interesting about that third panel is the gum line. There's implied lines in between the teeth that don't need to be there, because there's the implication of them. Those, we know what teeth are, and I think a lot of beginning artists will do what things are rather than what they look like. Like if people are drawing hair, you just see 1,000 lines, and it's like, that's actually what hair is a bunch of individual strands, but that's not what hair looks like, right? It gathers in locks and clumps, and it flows together, right? And teeth are the same thing. Like, technically they are individual items, or objects, but that's not how we perceive them. Our perception of them is as a unit. And so oftentimes the lack of line there, or having thinner lines rather than thicker lines, is more of the perception of teeth than the definition or reality of those teeth. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, yeah, exactly right. And I love the detail of the mouth curving inward like that. It's like, and he has this, and the thing that I adopted from him that I feel like has improved my teeth is he kind of has them going towards each other. Yeah. And when I saw him lay something out real quickly, that was the thing that I noticed, was there was this almost not quite pyramid, but in a way pyramid, where they're kind of merging to, there's a vanishing point above, and the bottom teeth are kind of going towards that vanishing point in a way.
Yeah, and it's almost a bit of foreshortening, right?
I'm talking more about the shape of it, and like how he directs the teeth. So like, this set here, like this kind of like, what are the incisors? They're the things that I'm paying attention to here, because they're pointing inward, like kind of like a diamond, or like a pyramid. The same with the top teeth here. That you see the top gum line, but they're kind of like, the vanishing point seems to be here. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So the gum lines are pointing towards this point, and your mouth it's not exactly flat. You know what I mean? It's not like a rectangle shape. It's like, it is, but it isn't at the same time. It's curved. There's depth to it. It's rounded. So it's just like, okay, well, I understand, like, now the teeth are kind of curving inward a little bit. It's not overly dramatic, but it's there. And that's the detail I learned by looking at his original art, is, or even like finding stuff, in the Ultimate Collection, and like just taking pictures of everything. So like, if I'm studying something, I take tons of pictures of it, or screen caps, or I'll Google it. I'll capture as many images as I can, so I can just repetitively look at them and find the commonality. Finding the commonality in what an artist does is the easiest way to break down their style. And so when I dissect things, I'm like, what do they do consistently? Because one of my biggest intrigues, one of my biggest things in comics that I love, that I'm fascinated with, is style. And, as artists grow, their style changes. And that's something I want to get to after we talk about your page.
Yeah. So these two pages, I'll zoom in on them in a minute, but I want to talk about the reason that I bought them. So I bumped into Ryan at what is now called Salt Lake Fan X, and I think at the time it was Salt Lake Comic Con. And same situation, like, he was drawing one of the best books out there, that I think remains one of the best books that's been made. And I just walked right up to his table. There's like no line. It was amazing. And he's such a cool guy. I talked to him for a while. One of the things that I found really interesting is, as he was talking to somebody else, somebody was getting a critique for him, which I wasn't doing at the time. And the guy, and he was telling the guy, that one of the things that he has done over the years is he has notebooks full of different body parts that he's drawn. So he's just got like a notebook for forearms and a notebook for upper arms, right? And then he's got, and so I wonder somewhere if there's like a Ryan Ottley notebook of teeth, like where he's just like done mouths over and over and over again. But that's what he was saying, that how he learned this. But so anyway, so at the time, I have not been drawing as long as you have, and so I'm about 12 years into this. I started really taking it seriously at about 32 to 34. Um, and at the time I was really struggling with perspective, because mathematically perspective is one way, but then the feeling of a scene can kind of be killed if you rigidly adhere to that. What I love about both of these, and I'm gonna zoom in a little bit so we can kind of see what I'm talking about here, but is he's using red line pencil to lay out the grid of his perspective, and then he's using blue line to do the characters. And so as you kind of look at this, like you can see his like Dutch angle grid that he's going off of. And in that same kind of way, he has this kind of zigzag pattern that brings you down through this. And so even the angle of these buildings, we got vertical lines coming off of here, but then these diagonal lines of this building are flowing into this building as well. They match, but then they're juxtaposed with this other building that brings us back in. So there's a bit of this kind of like V shape that sort of cradles this whole composition.
Yeah, and having Invincible flying upward and looking basically right at the next panel. It's beautiful storytelling.
Yeah.
Great use of a tall, long, skinny panel, by the way. Like, those are really hard to pull off. I know the image founders use them a ton.
Yeah.
And I'm hard pressed to find good uses of it all the time. I think the side effect of that, it creates bigger images on the right side. So if you can do something like this, you have this establishing shot where he's flying up off the ground and he's moving so fast it's pulling rubble, just like him taking off. And then him flying upward and looking to his left or right directs you right to the next page. So it's beautiful, clear storytelling. And then the direction of Mark's body going right towards dinosaurs, it's like, drawing you right in. So the storytelling is so precise. And to your point, even the layouts of the buildings are directing you where you need to go. Very cool.
Yeah. So that's what kind of what jumped out at me with that, is a lot of the same things that you said, but very specifically the perspective, but also what he's doing in your page, he's doing with faces, and what he's doing here, he's doing with bodies. And you could go through each one of these panels. And what I like about this page is there's a bit of a circular flow. And so, as we go up, like we're brought up, and he's looking that direction, but also at the very end of his like flight path, there's a little bit of a tilt, right? A little bit of a tilt to the right. So he's also flying straight up, and then he's leading into this action again, kind of the blood in the panels, right? The action in between that we're not seeing is everything that's happening to change the position of his body to come back down as an attack, which is really interesting, in that little hint of that gives us everything we need to go into this next pose. And again, he's doing the same thing. The flow of Dinosaurus here is going off to the right, but then he's looking back, which gives him that kind of connection, right? And then we have that impact. And so it's like a 1, 2, 3 in how that works. And what I love about the impact of this, I've been trying to do this in my comic, is whenever I have a really poignant impact of something, I try to simplify everything except that impact. And so if you look, he's like X'd out this building. He's got a lot of detail and cracks and things here. He's got a lot of detail. He's got broken glass. But in this one, that's all just spot black. That's like, there's enough windows there to get an idea that it's still one of the buildings. But then everything else is just going to be total black, and it's almost like that anime thing that you see where there's that flash frame of like stark high contrast during a punch, or during somebody throwing like a kamehameha or something. It feels in a very similar way. The planning of that is just really fascinating to me. And again, you got that juxtaposition of detail, simplicity, and detail kind of in a row there.
Yeah, and like you said with that top right panel, Invincible is flying towards Dinosaur. Dinosaur's looking back at him. It's a bit of a back and forth. And but with Dinosaur looking back at him, it draws your eye back to Invincible, but then down to the speed lines of him crashing into Dinosaur. And the
Right.
fact that it is a silhouette, it gives your eyes a break from all the detail and all the action. It's like, hey, here's just a clear, concise image of what this is. You guys will see the silhouette and know exactly what's happening. Gives you a little bit of a break. And then the panel right under it, I mean, the impact of the speed lines and then Mark crashing into Dinosaur, that automatically drops your eye lower, and the buildings are directing you back to the left. So it has this, zip up, and then to the right, and then back to the left, and then back to the right, and then back to the left. So this nice zigzag pattern going along the right side of this page is very strong. So just very clear directional devices that, some artists don't even do. Some older artists like do not follow this rule. And it's like, again, like I said earlier, the devil's in the details. These small things, now, while they're not necessary, they're helpful. It naturally draws the reader's eye to where it needs to go. So zooming out here, like we said, the top panel goes, left to right, back to left, then it goes down left to right, and then right to left, and then it drops you right to Mark's face screaming. You get some cool teeth there, and he's looking right at Dinosaur, and Dinosaur's looking back at him, facing him. And then again, like we talked about on my page with the last panel of Robot, the position of Robot's head and where his eyes are looking, it gives you a pause. This definitely keeps you in this moment. Both characters are essentially facing each other. It's a face-off, so it's making you halt here too. So very cool. How much did you get this page for?
120.
Not bad, man. There's a lot going on it.
Yeah,
there's a lot going on.
Pretty excited at the time. And at the time, because this is, I don't know when this was, but it was a while ago, probably 10 years ago or more. I was pretty broke. I wasn't making a lot of money, and so it was a bit of a sacrifice to do it. So I poured through his entire stack of pages, and this one, for a lot of reasons, stood out to me. Another thing that I think he's doing really well here, that I really like, along the lines of what you were talking about, is the 180 rule, right? Mark is always on the left, Dinosaurus is always on the right. And that helps because it's kind of like what they were doing with Mad Max Fury Road. They broke a lot of compositional rules by saying, like, the action is always going to be dead center, so that the viewer doesn't have to get confused and like find out where to look. Like you could technically have them switch spots, and it might be a more dynamic fight than just having them always in the same position, but it would slow it down because the reader's comprehension would be hampered a little bit. Whereas we know that there's an impact, there's a pushback, and then there's coming back. And so even in like the directions that they're going, the camera doesn't change their left and right position. In that we do get a downward angle here, and then it switches, and then it switches, and then it kind of flattens out. But Mark is always on the left, Dinosaurus is always on the right, which I find interesting. This page, this is not technically a big splash page, but it just has a huge panel on it, and it's got characters that I'm like, whatever. I typically wouldn't gravitate towards a page like this because I don't have the connection with the characters as much. But there's so much going on here in the energy change that it really drew me to it. And so this panel here feels calm. Like these two characters are unconscious, like all hell is breaking loose behind them. And yet, like, the fluidity of the line here, of the feathers of his wings, and then the kind of mirror fluidity of the shapeshifter's kind of legs kind of drooping in the same way. There's a grace that is juxtaposed to the energy and chaos of what's going on behind them, and it feels a little bit like salvation. It feels a little bit like, like he is saving them from the chaos, like in the mood of that. And then we shift down into here. We see emergency workers. They're like super small, and we just get what I find to be a very interesting panel, because we know who it is because it's got wings, right? We see his boots. We're going to get the color of that kind of coming
Whose
in.
wings are those?
Was it Bulletproof, or am I reading that
Yeah,
wrong?
yeah. When Bulletproof takes over as Invincible
Yeah,
for like I don't know, like 12 issues or something like that.
right.
Yeah, he doesn't have wings.
No, I've got to go look. I've got to go back and look at this.
Maybe he's got a third person that has wings there. That's what it is. Oh, it's her wings. Okay.
Is it hers?
Okay, my bad. Yeah, because
Okay.
those are definitely hers. Because if you look at her symbol, she has wings on it.
Oh yeah.
So,
Okay.
which makes a lot more sense. That bottom left panel you were just talking about, it's very cool because it has a nice the wings and the legs create a nice framing device around those characters. Yeah, and so it's like I'm very curious how the colorist would color that. If like I would probably drop them in like blues and stuff like that, and then
Right.
have the background and smaller characters more vibrant, so that way it pushes the frame even more. But it's just a very nice shot.
Yeah.
And that top panel too, Shapesmith, the wings, they're all directing you towards that bottom left panel. All of their limbs, essentially, they're all pointing you right there. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. The same thing. So we've got a very horizontal situation with this kind of like cannon pulling us across here, and then the curvature of the clouds and the explosion like pull us down into their figures, and then all of their limbs point us, and then we still have limbs here, but they start to tilt us in towards the right, and so you can kind of see the feathers of the wings and this foot. We come down, and it's like now you need to go over here, and this stretcher
Yeah,
kind of pulls us over as well. Yeah.
absolutely. How
If
much
you,
was this one?
this
Because
one
this
was,
one seems like at least a 250.
oh yeah, 150.
150.
Yeah.
Wow.
It was a while
Man,
ago,
that's
man,
a
right? It was
freaking
before
page.
anybody really knew how awesome he was.
Yeah,
But
it's
if
so
you
crazy.
but if you look at the underdrawing, I'm gonna zoom in here so we can see you're seeing like structural anatomy, right? Like he's figuring out like quadricep muscles. He's figuring out kind of the fatty pads of the inner thigh. He's figuring out the pelvis. Like he's got his line of action through here. Anyway, it's fascinating to see the construction of how he's building these characters. It's very much like we're gonna go in and get these basic kind of anchor points of the body and then build from there, because there's a simplicity to the way that his finished work looks. But when you look at like how he is constructing everything, like the reason that it reads so well is because he's so intentional about those major body parts of like shoulders, rib cages, the kind of pelvic bowl, you know. And you're seeing he's playing with different things. Like somebody's hand was here at first, and instead of going in and bothering to like, you know, erase that or whatever, he's just like, no, it's going to be over here, And so you can. This is one of the things that I love about original pages is being able to see some of the decision
Look at
making
those.
and the construction of what's going on. Right? You can see like how are you going to draw
Yeah.
somebody's hands or entire body can elongate or whatever. Like if a shapeshifter goes unconscious, like what happens? He actually starts to lose some of the structure, but the underlying ratios of those things, you're still getting like an elbow here, right? You're still getting like the pocket of that joint. You're still getting the muscles kind of along those lines, but they're kind of elongated. And so like the underdrawing of this one is one of the ones that really kind of drew me to it. You've got this like killer foreshortening, a la old school 90s Deadpool, where you've got like, the fingers, and then you've got the hilt, and then you've got the forearm and the bicep and the shoulder, and it's just stacked. Like he's just stacking everything in these big giant shapes. And you can see that he was a lot he spent a lot more time on the figures here and making sure that's correct, whereas anatomy here almost doesn't matter as much as like stacking each impactful layer of depth. And so he's just like big circles in the blue line. He's like, I'm going to have a shoulder. I'm going to have a bicep. I'm going to have a forearm. I'm going to have a fist. And they're just, there isn't even really much to this gun in the blue line. He's like, I'll figure that out in the pencils.
Yeah, go to Shapesmith's hands. I love, what you had said about, okay, the form of someone who could shapeshift, where Shapesmith, his form is not a human. So he's like kind of melting, deforming in a way. And I love that he still has the understructure of how hands work. He goes, okay, the tendons and stuff go through your palm like this. And if it was elongated, so he's still figuring out where those lines would be underneath, and he's picking and choosing which to show and which to not. And that's something I'm really into right now as well, is knuckles in hands, and like kind of showing those little things off. I do love this thing certain artists do. It would be the Shapesmith's left hand, R right, or the lower hand. Mm-hmm. He has that gap in between the fingers. Yeah. There, and I just love kind of that, where it's like, if you didn't read a lot of comics and you just like saw this for the first time, you would think he has like skin attaching at the knuckles. But there's something about that I just really enjoy. And it's like an artistic decision, because that's not what that looks like in real life. Like, that's not how that happens. I'm like, yeah, there's spaces, but there's obviously a line. Kind of like going back to the teeth thing, where you don't draw every line. It's like, well, sometimes you don't draw every line in between the space of the fingers. You can, and like the hands, it doesn't affect your visual enjoyment of the image as much, but I still love kind of small details like that. I thought it was really cool.
Yeah. What I love is you get this type of thing. Like a lot of people would do a through line all the way from the toe to the knee, right? But there's that little notch at the joint of the ankle when you point your toe that bulges right there, right? So we get the pinch or the crease here, and then he pushes out, and it's such a subtle thing, but it just adds just that another percentage of realism to this. Like, there's stuff like that Ryan does all the time, where it's just like, it's crazy, right? And you see the same thing. You see the same thing here. The top of the foot isn't flat, right? He's got a little bit of a curve, and then a little bit of a curve in there. So we've got a very subtle compressed S between this bulge and that indentation. Anyway, it's just,
and I like that. I do that same thing on the heel there, where you would bend your foot if you were wearing boots or high top shoes. See, he has that little bunch. There's a bunch right between the heel and the ankle. And that's what your shoe would do. If you would bend it, if you're wearing boots, it would curl like that. And I always like to do the little details like that. It makes a lot of sense. And like going back to what you were saying earlier about the understructure and how he's clearly defining everything. He knows where everything is, and then he's picking and choosing what to pull out and show everyone.
Let's tell them where to get our stuff. So you can check out my stuff at CoryKerr.com. If you want to read my comic, Rage of Enlightenment, a community of insects rebelling against an unethical rollout of this monopolist in their community, and the rebellion that happens with that, you can go to CoryKerr.com/comic. And you can subscribe to that and get notifications as they drop new pages. They're all free, dropping on Substack. And my website, you can go to CoryKerr.com/rage. And Scott, where can we find your stuff?
You could find Second Shift, Minimum Wage Superheroes, and Wanderers of Melisande is Anthropomorphic Dinosaurs versus Humans. One of my newest books out is Don Simpson's Megaton Man Multi-Mentions. This is a treasury size edition, so this trade is comic book size. So there you can see the difference in scale. I do not have these two on the website right now. I'll give you the website, but you can hit me up at Scott Lost, SCOTTLOST on Twitter, Instagram, Threads, Blue Sky, Facebook.com/Scott Lost. You can find my comics at accidentalaliens.com. It'll have Second Shift books in there, volume 1. This is volume 0. I don't think volume 0 is up. I just had it redone. And this is not up quite yet. But if you hit me up at any of the other social medias, you can get me there. Or you can email me at scottlost@yahoo.com. I love this. This is sick. This is my newest book. I got to put the Second Shift in this book with Don Simpson's characters. So just seeing it at this size is pretty freaking cool.
That's so legit, dude. Did you draw that? Did you draw that at the same size, or you're doing digitally? Yeah.
I do digital. I was able to get in on that and have my characters in the book. So huge get for me. If you hit me up on any of my social medias, the trade paperback for that is $40. It's 228 pages, treasury size, like I said. And, I have the second shift volume 0. That's $20. accidentalaliens.com. You can find my other book, Wanderers of Melisande. It's anthropomorphic dinosaurs versus humans. And Astounding Adventures has 2 stories of mine. So all that stuff is at accidentalaliens.com.
Cool. All right, guys. Thanks for watching. Appreciate you watching, and go make stuff.